So hey, and welcome to Using the Reference Viewer. The purpose of this video actually is to delete our starter content from our project altogether and to bring the starter content folder out of the gitignore so that we have all of our starter content type material tracked by source control when we do choose to use it. So we simply won't have starter content at all at the end, and everything in our content will be being properly tracked by source control, paving the way for us to use projectiles properly, being sure that we're starting from the actual starter content without any modifications. So I'll see you in there. So our mission here is to get rid of the starter content folder because it's not currently tracked under source control. Remember, in our .gitignore we're ignoring it, and therefore any changes we make to it are not being tracked, and that's dangerous. I in particular have caused a problem. If I just show you, if we look in the starter content and then we go to particles, this p_explosion that comes in the starter content, don't worry about how it works for now, but I have edited it offline between videos and I have added an extra smoke emitter, and that's going to cause problems. So that's symptomatic of an overall issue that we're not tracking changes in starter content. Now, we've chosen not to because starter content is large. If you have a look at starter content's properties, you'll see that it's 600 meg. We don't want to put all that under source control, especially as if I use tree size, you'll see that most of it is textures and most of those we never use. So the skill I want to show you is using the reference viewer and using Unreal's reference checking to work out how we can delete stuff and move stuff without losing any references, anything important. So let's see the process for doing that. If we just try and firstly let's back up the starter content before we do anything else. So I'd suggest you close Unreal, go to your file system, go find your Battle Tank folder and go into Content, Starter Content, right click it, send it to a zip file and pop it on your desktop. I've already done that to save time, and just take it completely out of the folder, okay? And that way you've got a backup of your starter content, because remember, it's not being tracked under source control. That should make you a little bit nervous. I'm going to close Visual Studio because it's nothing to do with this video, and let's go back into Unreal, which is somewhere around here. Here we go. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is get you going on this, show you the ideas, a couple of tips and tricks, and then I'm going to leave it to you to go and manage to delete your starter content folder. So now that we have a backup, we can just try and delete it. Right-click on starter content in the content browser and delete. It's not just going to delete it. I know that the ceiling of the sky uses a cube and that the grass is painted on the landscape and there's dirt on the hills, and you may have used other starter content stuff as well. But this system will now go ahead and check for references and dependencies, and it'll warn us before it deletes anything, which is quite cool. There you go. So if we start with this, metal rust, I happen to know that that's used by this mortar. So this is the asset that's using the referenced assets, and then the referenced asset in this case is the rust. The flatland is going to be using grass and gravel, and then we've got glass on the ceiling, and we have a cube as well on that ceiling. And then I'm not seeing much else in the list. No, I think that's it. Well, we can get rid of the glass and the cube very easily because that is all about this sky glass here. We don't need that. If I just delete that from the scene completely, then we should have solved at least those reference issues. Let's go ahead and rerun the delete. Before you rerun the delete, you want to be saving everything just to make sure that it's caught up with you. So go ahead and rerun the delete, and this time it should find less things that are dependent on the starter content folder. That's what it's looking for. It's ignoring self-references within the starter content folder. For instance, if a particle system requires a texture and they're both in the starter content, that won't be reported here. That's a good thing. That keeps it simple for us. Okay, so what do we have now? We have rust, grass, and gravel. Seem like they're the only things. Yeah, and between them, they're used on the mortar, the flatland, and the battleground. Let's start with the mortar, and I'll leave you to do the landscape texture or the landscape roughness thing and then the battleground itself. The general principle is this. Let's look at the rust. For a start, let's find rust within the starter content, M metal rust. There it is. If you right-click it and say Reference Viewer, it will show you not only what depends on rust, so the mortar and the starter map, don't care about the starter map, but the mortar depends on rust. And then rust, what does that depend on? And all these things on the right here, there's up to 15 it's rendering. You can choose that here. So the rust itself depends on all these things. Some of these are in the starter content. These three, the macro variation, which makes the rust look different over a larger scale, the color of the rust itself, and then the normal map, which gives it bumpiness, are all in the starter content. So if you want to get all of these out, as well as the asset itself, you right-click and say Find in Content Browser. Then you go back to your content browser, and it will have highlighted these textures that rust depends on. Now you can move those into the mortar folder. We'd also better remove Rust itself. Where is Rust itself? It seems not to be here, but that's because I'm probably looking in the wrong folder. There you go. Rust is in the materials folder. Let's move that over to the mortar too. Great. Now, if we go back to the materials folder, or to the starter content, look for Rust, it seems to have all gone, which is good news. It's all inside the mortar folder, along with all the other bits. Okay, so if we do a save all, and then we go ahead and try and delete the starter content, we should be working through the list now and getting rid of things that depend on starter content. Ultimately, as I said, what we'll do, once we've managed to get rid of starter content, is remove it from source control and live a happy life with everything in our project properly tracked, apart from all the derived files, of course. So let's just let this search finish, and then I'll throw you into a challenge. So what do we got? We've just got grass and gravel now. The mortar still seems to be dependent upon something. Could it be this reference further down the list? Let's have a look. Metal rust. Okay, let's just deal with these object redirectors. So there is one more thing left. Let me show you what happened. When we moved the rust material from the starter contents materials folder into the mortar, this guy here, look what it did. You can't see it unless you go to filters, other filters, and then show redirectors. They're like aliases. If you do that, you'll find, through a search maybe easiest, that we have a Rust redirector in the materials folder. And that was just Unreal's way of making sure there was a bridge over to the Rust new location in case it's needed. But we're trying to get rid of the starter content folder. So we can get rid of that redirector like this. Right-click the materials folder and fix up redirectors. It says that it finds references to all redirectors in the selected folders and resaves them if possible and deletes any redirectors that have all their references fixed. Perfect. So we do that. Now there are no redirectors, which means that if we now try and delete starter content, this is a pretty common gotcha, that these redirectors can confuse you and you may not be able to see the redirectors, but remember, you turn on the filter, other, show redirectors, and then you get to see those aliases. Now we're going to do a search again, and we should only have two assets that depend on anything, and they're those two, and it's the grass and gravel, and anything that the grass and gravel require that we need to move out now. And guess what? Who's going to do that? You are. So make sure you've backed up your folder as a zip file. Try deleting your starter content, move all referenced assets out or delete relevant objects, and then eventually delete the starter content folder. Close and reopen the editor and test everything works. And then when you've done that, share your nice new tidy folder structure as an image or some other how in our discussions over on the community site. And I'll see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. So I am going to just observe this. I think it's grass and gravel are the only things left. So I'm going to go and find grass and inside the starter content. Let's start with the grass. Ground grass. There are actually three things. Now, the ground grass is the thing in question, I think, or was it the texture? Good question. I will just go back and have a look. I don't remember which type of grass it was. If these searches take a long time, you could always use something like Snagit, a screen capture tool, to grab the result of the search and then go in one big pass through, deal with everything, and then only run the search infrequently because it's quite a slow dependency search. So I could come here with Snagit. I have a keyboard shortcut for that. And have I got Snagit open somewhere? Should have. And I can come and snapshot that. And then I can see exactly that it's T ground grass and T ground gravel. It's the textures. So we start from T ground grass. We look at the reference viewer for that, and we see what it depends on. Well, ostensibly, it doesn't depend on anything. That's interesting. So I should T ground grass D. I'm not trusting that entirely. What are the references for the others? Grass, yeah, grass depends on all this stuff, you see, in the starter content. If you're going to use grass, which we have been doing as a material on our landscape, we're going to need to take all this stuff with it, the Perlin noise, the macro variation, all that. So again, we can find in the content browser, move all this stuff into the battleground folder, and then I'm going to go back to my screenshot, if I can find it in here, and see what else we had. We also had the gravel. So I'm going to look for gravel. T-ground gravel, I'm going to look at its references. Let's try the other one. Yeah, I think most of them have gone across, so I just need to move both bits that relate to the gravel into the battleground folder. And that should be pretty much it. Let's go ahead and save everything, rerun the deletion script, and see if we've got all our dependencies out of the starter content folder. It'll be a big sigh of relief when we can finally get rid of it, close Unreal, remove it from source control, and we'll be happy bunnies in the safety of no more mess ups due to changes in starter content. So we still have some things both on the flatland asset. What have we got? T-ground, Dravel, D. Okay, it's just object redirectors. All of these problems now are redirectors. So we can right click, fix up redirectors in folder. I think that will do it recursively through the subfolders. I think I saw it do it just then. So now if I delete the starter content, finally, with the redirectors gone, we should be in a position where we have no starter content and all of our stuff is nicely put away with the assets that need them, like the rust with the mortar, etc. Now, you may want to separate your assets out differently as your project gets bigger, but this is a great start. Yeah, this is the thing we want to get to, pending deleted assets. So let's delete all that. So unloading everything, deleting it, and no more folder that's talking about starter content. Great, I'm going to get rid of this filter. I'm going to do what I suggested you do, which is close and then reopen the editor. Then we've got a tiny bit of source control work to do, and we are done. So I reopen the editor. Now, has starter content come back? It has. So what I'm going to do is just close the editor, go to content, and delete off the disk the starter content folder, and then reload Unreal. You need to do that with Unreal closed. And there it is, no longer there. It's all very well it no longer being there. Don't celebrate yet. Make sure that your game runs. I deleted a folder. Oh, I broke my game. Not so clever. So everything appears to be okay. We've done it quite carefully. That's good news. So finally, close Unreal, close Visual Studio. Let's open up our getignore file. Now, there are two getignore files in my project anyway. One's at the root here of the project, and that has in a couple of things. It has battletank.vc.opendb and the .vs folder. So let's keep that on the left. And then if I go into Battletank, I've got another getignore, which is the one we're going to keep, which has all this stuff in it. But it doesn't have the Battletank VC OpenDB, so I'm going to move that into there. And I'm going to move the .vs / so we ignore everything in the hidden VS folder like that. I'm going to save this getignore on the right, so I've just added those things. I'm also going to get rid of the starter content removal at the bottom. So what we're doing in our main getignore is we're consolidating two getignore files together, and we are making it start tracking starter content, and we're putting these things in so that we can delete this other getignore. Let's just save it all, and I'll show you the changes, because getignores themselves, of course, are subject to version control. Let's have a look at what the changes are. If I stage all this, the following things are 10 meg or larger. That's okay. I'm going to live with that. I don't think they're too huge. I'm going to stage the getignore, and then you can see the changes I made to the getignore. The one in the Battletank folder has just had these two things added to it and the starter content taken out. And the getignore that's at the top level here, I'm going to delete because I don't need it. I only want one getignore. Some instances you want more than one. In this case, I don't. So when this catches up, it should notice that I've deleted the other getignore. There it is. Stage that deletion, and we're good to go. So we've deleted a getignore, moved a bunch of assets. They look like pluses in here because they've come under folders that are now tracked by source control. We've modified that main getignore, and we are in a good position here. So let's go ahead, commit our work, and carry on with starter content properly tracked under source control.